all about indirect reasoning, okay? So, AKA proving something indirectly, okay? So we're going to go about it not a straight shooter, like calling someone out, but well, I know it wasn't this person, I know it wasn't that person, therefore it must be you, right? Instead of going to someone and saying, you did this. Indirectly, we'd say, well, I know they didn't, and I know they didn't, and you're the only one left, so it must be you. That's indirect. So we are going to be doing indirect reasoning, where basically you say, here's all the possibilities. I know this one isn't it. I know that one isn't it. I know that one isn't it. Therefore, it must be what's left over. Okay? Indirect reasoning. We call it proof by contradiction. Okay? Proof by contradiction. Now, the nice thing is, typically with these indirect proofs, the statement that we start with and the negation of that statement are usually the only possibilities, which makes it very nice because you don't have to say, well, I know it's not this, I know it's not this, I know it's not this, therefore it's this. It's just like, here's my two options. I know this one doesn't work, therefore it must be this other one, okay? So there are 3 steps to every indirect proof. Always 3, always the same 3. As long as you can do these 3 steps, you're in really good shape. So step 1 of any indirect proof is that you are going to assume temporarily. Now, the book puts the temporarily in every single time. I don't make you do that. You may just say assume, but you must say assume, okay? Assume the opposite or the negation of what you want to prove, okay? So if my question is, prove to me that John Ross is wearing yellow, you would say, assume temporarily John Ross is not wearing yellow, right? So you're going to assume the opposite of what you're trying to prove, okay? Then once we do that, step 2 of every indirect proof is you're going to show that that assumption leads to contradictions, okay? For instance, if I said, assume temporarily John Ross is not wearing yellow, the contradiction is I'm looking at John Ross and he has a yellow sweater on, right? That's contradictory to me saying he's not wearing yellow. So contradictions. And then step 3, you conclude that the assumption is false. And literally that's what you're going to say. You're going to say the assumption is false, and then you will restate your initial statement. Whatever they asked you to prove is true. So I would say the assumption is false. John Ross is wearing yellow. Okay? Those 3 steps for every single indirect proof. Now, the nice thing is, a lot of the time, I don't make you do all of those steps. I'll say, what's the first step of this proof? Or find the contradiction in this scenario, okay? It's piece by piece a lot of the time. There's a few where you actually have to walk through the whole proof, but a lot of the time it's broken down. So let me break it down for you, and then we'll do a couple that are full-on proofs. Example 1. It says, what is the first step of this proof? So given that you have quadrilateral XYZA, they're asking us to prove that this quadrilateral does not have 4 acute angles. Okay? All we want is the first step. Look up here. The first step is assume. So we are going to assume. If you want to write temporarily, you're welcome to. I don't make you do that. Assume what? What is the opposite of what they're asking us to prove?
Quad XYZ does have.
Yes. So this says does not, right? The opposite would be to take out that not and say assume quadrilateral XYZA does have 4 acute angles. Okay? So sometimes the negation is literally just putting the word not in or taking the word not out. Like if I said, prove the sky is blue, you would say, assume the sky is not blue, right? You just put the word not in. Or if I said, prove to me that today is not Tuesday, you would say, assume today is Tuesday. Take the word not out of it. or put the word not into it is a lot of the time all you have to do. Not every time, but a lot of the time. Okay, so letter B there. What would your first step of that proof be? You're given that an integer is n. Prove n is divisible.
N is not divisible by 2.
Okay, if you two were to get together there, that would be exactly what you need, right? Assume n is not divisible by 2. So make sure you put the word assume in there, because we're not saying that's true, right? We're saying just assume it for a minute. So you're going to say assume n is not divisible by 2. Does that make sense? Questions? Okay. Example 2 is what step 2 is asking you to do. Find some contradiction here. So letter A, you're given 3 statements. Triangle ABC is acute, triangle ABC is scalene, and triangle ABC is equiangular. What is an acute triangle? All the angles are less than 90. Yep. What is a scalene triangle?
Where all 3 sides are not equal.
Right. All 3 sides have a different length. Okay. And what is an equiangular triangle? All what is the same? The angles. All of your angles are the same. Okay. So somewhere in there, 1, 2, and 3, 2 of those cannot happen simultaneously. Do you know which 2? Scalene and equiangular. Number 2 and number 3 cannot happen at the same time. Why?
Different types of triangles.
Right. A scalene triangle has 3 different side lengths. What are the side lengths of an equiangular? All the same. So you cannot have a scalene that is equiangular. Okay, so look for contradiction. Look for where, nope, that cannot happen together. Okay? What?
So we can do ABC.
No, this is just tell me the contradiction. So you would say 2 and 3 are the contradictions. You can't do 2 with 3. You don't even have to write anything about the proof in. Okay, so letter B, it says triangle URT is acute, triangle URT is scalene, and triangle URT is obtuse. Which 2 are not compatible? 1 and 3. You cannot have an acute triangle that is also an obtuse triangle. So you would say 1 and 3 contradict each other. Okay. Okay. So we're going to walk through 1 proof, and then example 4 is just the first step. Example 3 here is a full indirect proof. Okay, so the proof will start with this. Given that 8 times x plus y equals 48 and y does not equal 2, prove to me that x does not equal 4. Okay, what would your first step of that proof be? Assume that x does equal 4, right? We assume the opposite. And here's the thing, guys. Lots of you on the quiz or the test are going to forget that you're assuming the proof part, and you're going to try to tell me this. Don't use this, okay? This is only to help you come up with a contradiction. The assumption has to come from what you prove, okay? So step 1 always comes from the prove statement. Keep that in mind. So this would be assume or assume temporarily that x is equal to 4, okay? Step 2 then is we have to come up with a contradiction. So if we're trying to prove that x does not equal 4, we just said assume x does equal 4, okay? So if x equals 4, let's take a look at that. What do we get here? We're going to say 8 times 4 plus y equals 48, and we're going to solve for our y. So I would divide by 8. You could distribute. I'm not going to because it's just more steps. 4 plus y equals 6, and take away 4, and I get y equals 2. Do you see the contradiction? y does not equal 2. And when we plugged in 4, y equaled 2, right? So this is our contradiction. Y cannot equal 2. Therefore, now your third step is to say the assumption is false, and then you restate what they asked you to prove. X does not equal 4. Okay, so assume, find the contradictions, state the assumption is false, and restate what they asked you to prove. That's the full proof. Questions on that? Okay. Look at example 4 here, because this one can be overlooked if you aren't thinking through it. It says you're going to write an indirect proof showing that, in other words, proving, so this is the part you would prove, angle X is obtuse. In your first step, you assume temporarily that angle X is acute. Why is that a bad assumption? Julia.
It could be other things besides acute and obtuse,
Like what?
right?
Like a right triangle, right? We aren't covering a right triangle if we say that. So rather than say angle X is obtuse, and we say assume temporarily angle X is acute, what would be a better first step?
Assume X is not obtuse.
Yes, assume angle X is not obtuse would be a better first step. What have you overlooked? You've overlooked a right triangle. I guess that would be the only other option, but we didn't cover a right triangle at all between those two statements. So just make sure you're covering every other option, and you should be good. Questions on that?